If you search best AI code review tools, almost every search ranks them by how much they help a single developer work faster. But once you're running with hundreds of repos and thousands of developers, what decides which tools works the best at scale is completely different. So what I'm going to do today is go through a full comparison of the 3 tools enterprise teams evaluate the most: Qodo, Greptile, and GitHub Copilot Code Review. If you're trying to get your whole engineering team on the right AI code review tool, stick around till the end, because this video is going to give you all the details and you'll have full clarity on which one is the best for your situation. Let's dive in. So before we get to the tools, let me quickly cover what actually makes a code review tool enterprise grade. Because when you only got a few developers, all of these tools look about the same. When it's one developer opening one pull request, every tool here can read the changes and leave useful comments. The differences only show up once you've got hundreds of separate code projects or repos and thousands of developers all changing the code at the same time. And at that size, whether a tool is actually enterprise grade comes down to 3 things. The first is whether the tool can see your whole code base or only the lines that you just changed. A lot of tools only read the diff, meaning the specific lines a developer added or removed. The problem is that in a big code base, a change in one place can break code somewhere completely different without anyone noticing. Only a tool that can look across your whole code base instead of just lines that change catches that before it ever goes out. The second thing that makes a tool enterprise grade is whether you can actually enforce your coding standards across the whole team and prove what got reviewed. Most tools give suggestions a developer can take or ignore, which is fine when you got 5 engineers who know all the rules. But once you got thousands of developers across different time zones, your standards end up in a document nobody ever reads, and they get applied differently on every review. So being enterprise grade means those standards get checked automatically on every pull request, and you get a record of exactly what was checked. The third thing is whether you get to control where your code is even allowed to run. A lot of tools only run in their own cloud, which means your code has to leave your company's network to get reviewed. For a bank, a hospital, or a defense contractor, that's not even an option, because they're not allowed to send their source code outside of their own systems. So now that you know what makes a tool enterprise grade, let's go through the 3 tools one by one and see how each one compares, starting with Qodo, since it's the one built specifically for code review. Now, we've built Qodo, so obviously I'm a little bit biased here, but I'll be straight up about who it's best for and where one of the other 2 is better choice. Qodo reads your whole code base before it ever reviews a change, using something we call context engine, and it indexes all your repos and past pull requests ahead of time. So by the time it reviews a change, it already understands how that change fits into the rest of your code, instead of only seeing the lines you've edited. It also runs several specialized review agents at once, separate checkers that each focus on one kind of problem, like actual bugs and security problems, duplicated code, breaking changes, and anything that goes against your team's own rules. To make this concrete, let me show you how that looks like on a real pull request inside GitHub. So in here I have a little web client demo application where I just added a dashboard component. I have installed Qodo on my organization, so now every pull request is automatically reviewed. The first thing I get is this nice little summary made by Qodo, which is going to show a description of the change, a diagram, and some high-level assessment of the changes being made. Once the code review is done, Qodo is going to give me a list of all of the findings. Each finding is put into its own category. So for example, I have a bug over here, which has a direct call to the local host. A silly mistake that can happen as you are creating stuff on your local development. Here's another problem that may look a little bit more realistic. This comment points out that I have forgotten to add error handling to my function, which can definitely cause some trouble in the future. Each comment is also containing some evidence, so if, for example, this was a rule violation, I would get a reference to that exact rule and the exact sentence in that rule. Besides the summary, I get each one of these findings referenced on the line of code as a single comment. So once the review runs, you've you've got everything in a single comment, sorted out by how urgent each issue is. In our own numbers, developers accept almost 74% of the fixes Qodo suggests. And Gartner, the big tech research firm, ranked it #1 for code understanding. If you want to give Qodo a try for yourself to see if you like it, I'll leave a link at the top of the description. Anyway, let's move on to the next tool. Greptile is a lighter, simpler tool, and for some teams that's exactly what they want. So there's barely anything to set up. What I mean by lighter is that it just reviews the pull request in front of it and leaves quick comments without indexing your whole codebase first. So there's barely anything to set up. If you're a small team that just wants a fast second opinion on each pull request, it's a solid fit. The downside for a big company is that it only looks at one pull request in front of it, so it misses anything that involves your other repos. Then there's GitHub Copilot Code Review, and a lot of teams already have it. Copilot is mainly good for helping you write code, like finishing your lines and suggesting what to type next. The code review is a feature added onto that, so it can leave comments on a pull request, but reviewing code isn't what it was really built for. Basically, Copilot works as a writing assistant that can also leave comments, while Qodo works as the review system underneath your whole team. And those two can actually work well together, since plenty of teams use Copilot to write their code faster, then run a separate review tool to check it. So to summarize, Copilot writes your code, Greptile reviews a single pull request, and Qodo reviews across your whole code base. Now I'm going to show you how these tools compare when it comes to enforcing your coding standards, keeping tech debt under control, and passing your security and deployment requirements. So the first thing is how each tool helps keep your whole team writing code to the same standards. And this gets a lot harder once you got a big team. Picture a company with 500 developers across a few time zones, where your coding standards are written in a style nobody ever reads, and the rest is just in the heads of a few senior engineers. That means two different reviewers will enforce them differently, and a mistake that gets caught in one pull request will go straight through on the next. What you need is for your standards to get checked automatically on every pull request the same way every time, no matter who's reviewing. That's what Qodo rule system does. So you write a rule once in one central place, and every review checks against it on its own. You can even learn rules from how your team already reviews. So a comment your senior engineers keep making over and over can become a rule that gets applied automatically. Every check is also recorded, meaning you've got the audit trail your compliance team asks for, and it can send those same rules out to tools your developers write code with, like Cursor, Copilot, and Claude Code. So the tool writing the code already follows the same rules the reviewer checks for. For example, let's say you've got a rule that every new login or payment page needs a limit on how many times someone can try it, so an attacker can't run thousands of password guesses against your login page. Once that rule is set, every pull request that adds one of those pages automatically gets checked for it across every repo, whether the human reviewer remembers it or not. So let me show you where you can actually set those rules up and what it looks like when one of those gets broken. So back in my PR, you can see that one of the changes that I have made is a rule violation. Because I'm making a direct network call, which is something that I'm not supposed to do, Qodo flags this issue. When I look at the evidence portion of this comment, I can see my agent rule being referenced. So not only I get told that I have violated a rule, but I also get a reference to where that rule sits. Back in Qodo dashboard, I can take a look at all of the rules in my organization in the Review Standards tab. Qodo even creates suggestions so that when it recognizes a certain pattern in my organization, it's going to go ahead and suggest a rule that should be applied in all of my future pull requests. So instead of hoping every reviewer remembers every standard, it's written down once and checked on every single review. This is something that Greptile and Copilot's reviews just aren't built to do. Both of them are made to comment on a single pull request so they can flag something they happen to notice, but they can't hold one standard across thousands of pull requests and give you a record of it. A good example of this is a company called HiBob. They make HR software, and with a team of over 200 developers, getting everyone to follow the same standards is pretty hard. They now run a Qodo review on every single pull request, and before a second human reviewer gets assigned, the person who opened it has to confirm they've already handled Qodo's comments. This means following the standard is just a part of how every change moves forward, and there's no way for anyone to skip past it. The next thing to compare is how each tool helps you deal with tech debt, which is a problem that slowly gets worse over time, even when everyone's following the rules. Over the years, your codebase fills up with messy, repeated, and out-of-date code that makes everything slower and riskier to change. And that's basically what tech debt is. It costs your team a huge amount of time as well. For example, a code quality company called SonarSource found that engineers spend about 42% of their time just fixing bugs and dealing with tech debt instead of building new things. Now look, most tech debt comes from three things, and a good review tool can catch all three before they ever get into your codebase. The first thing is duplicated code, meaning the same logic written in a bunch of different places. Say that the same price formatting code gets copied into 5 different lines, and then someone fixes a bug in one copy. So when you're using Qodo, what it does is catch when a pull request is adding a code that already exists somewhere else, so that your team can just reuse the version that's already there. The second place tech debt comes from is from a breaking change, which is when a change to one part of the code accidentally breaks something in a completely different part. The third is the codebase just getting harder and harder to work with over time because everyone builds their part a little differently than how it was originally set up, until none of it really fits together anymore. And the simpler tools miss most of this for one reason. If a tool only reads the lines you changed, it has no way to know that the same code already exists in 3 other repos, or that another part of your system depends on what you just changed. You know what? Let me just show you how one of these changes actually look like inside Qodo. So this is a pull request from my other repository, which is an API service. I've made some simple changes, and Qodo actually flagged a couple of issues. The first one that is really important is the cross-repo conflict. Nothing in this particular change is broken, but if I were to merge this, it would break the production. The problem is within the contract between my backend repository and my web client. If I take a look at the evidence, we can see that an external repo is being referenced. Another issue that's being flagged is a duplicated total calculation logic. So this is something I already have in my repository, and again, evidence is going to show me where that logic is. The relationships between different repositories is something I can set up in Qodo dashboard. As you can see in this nice graph, I have a relationship set up between my web client demo and API server demo. If I need, I can add more relationships, or I can let Qodo to auto-discover them. This is the kind of thing you'd never spot just by reading the pull request on its own. A good example of this is a communications company called LoopUp. One single finding from Qodo caught that a piece of their app setup code was being loaded twice, and just fixing that one duplicate caught their page load by 70 to 80%. That's exactly the kind of hidden, repeated code that a tool only reading the changed lines would never catch. The last thing to compare is security, because before a big company will let any tool near their code, their security team has a few questions that need to come before anything else. Basically, they want to know 3 things. What does the tool catch? What does it do with our code? And where is it allowed to run? First, they want to know what the tool actually catches. And this is a bigger deal than it used to be, because AI is writing so much more of the code now. AI-written code tends to have more security problems in it, and SonarSource found 3 times as many security vulnerabilities in AI-assisted code. So Qodo's security check looks for exactly those, like an API key or a password left sitting in the code where anyone with access can read it. Second, they want to know what the tool does with your code, and this is the compliance side of it. The main thing here is that Qodo doesn't keep your code after the review is done, so nothing is stored, and it never uses your code to train an AI model. It's also checked by an outside firm to make sure that it handles your data safely, and that check is the SOC 2 Type 2 certification most enterprise security teams look for. And you also get a single sign-on and controls over who can access what, which is usually enough to make a security team comfortable. Third, they want to know where the tool is allowed to run. And for a lot of companies, this is the question that decides whether they can use a tool at all. There are three options here. Cloud, where Qodo runs everything for you. On-Prem, which means it runs inside your own servers so your code never leaves your environment. And air-gapped, a completely sealed off setup with no internet connection at all. A lot of tools only run their own cloud. So for a bank, a hospital, or a defense contractor that can't send code outside its own network, that tool is an instant no matter how good the review is. To show you this works even at a massive company, take a Fortune 100 retailer with tens of thousands of developers that runs all of these completely air-gapped. They put it in front of more than 26,000 developers and it saved each one about 50 hours a month, adding up to more than 450,000 developer hours saved in a single year. Anyway, now you've got a nice checklist to judge any of these tools on. So let's talk about which one you should actually pick. If you're a small team that just wants a quick comment on each pull request without much setup, Greptile does it well. And if your developers already write code with GitHub Copilot, its built-in review is a fine place to start and it works well next to a separate review tool. But if you need a reviewer that sees your whole code base, enforces your standards with an audit trail, and works wherever your code is required to stay, whether that's your own servers or fully air-gapped, that's exactly what Qodo is built for. And you can get started for free by clicking the first link below this video. You'll have the full review running on your own pull requests in just minutes, catching the problems across your codebase that diff-only tools simply can't see, with no setup required to start. So again, you can start using Qodo for free by clicking the top link of the description. And if you want to know all the differences between manual and automated code review, then check out this video next.